I love Japan. I know that really isn't a very shocking statement since almost everybody in this day and age seems to be interested in it as well. For many years now, Japanese culture and media has made its way into the West, held by movie, anime, and video games, thus drawing a lot of interest in the country, the people, and their traditions. We all have something we find particularly attractive about the country. It could be maybe its beautiful landscapes, their mythology, their history, the way they live. And with anime making its way into the mainstream, more people have been able to experience all these things at the same time, making many idolize it, going so far as to call it the perfect place on earth. My fascination for Japan started when I was pretty young. I'd say when I was about 10 years old and thinking that samurais were very cool with the whole honor system, their looks, and their armor. I remember spending entire evenings just watching documentaries about how katanas were made, just dreaming about owning one. Many would assume that my interest for Japan started with anime because I do have a track record of watching my first share of it, but to be honest, I actually struggled to like anime as a kid, thinking that they were shows only for grown-ups and that they were kinda boring. I was watching Dragon Ball and all, but mostly because everyone around me did so too. But it wasn't until one day with nothing better to do that I decided to give Naruto a chance when my interest skyrocketed and stayed high up until this day. I read and own a lot of manga, I own games, literature about it, I do art, and I did get that katana that I so much wanted. Well, two, actually. And in recent years, I started to watch a lot of Japanese movies. Started with Yojimbo, then going through the Hidden Fortress, Samurai 1, Seven Samurai, Rashomon, the list goes on. And that's what brings us here. I want to talk about a little movie called An Autumn Afternoon. I found this movie while searching for something to watch with my mom. We ended up watching Lord of the Rings because after watching the first 10 minutes of the movie, I knew this was something that I had to experience by myself because this movie is right down my alley. It's Japanese, there's only talking, it's slow, it's weird, and I love it. As the summary says, in an increasingly Americanized Tokyo, a father gives up his only daughter in marriage, but it's much more complicated than that. To better understand what this movie is about, we first need to take a look into Japanese marriage culture. Yes, we're in class now, baby, sit down. Now, this is a very Japanese movie for older Japanese people with very Japanese values, and I am very Gen Z and very Westerner. So, I'm not gonna even begin to criticize nor impose the different values and biases I grew up with. But it is important to learn about this topic to better understand the context of the movie. You see, this movie takes place in the post-war era of Japan around 1945 and 1962, but touches on the values of the Meiji period, which is around 1868 to 1912. Because even though the movie takes place in 1962 Japan, most of the characters are in their 60s, so they most likely grew up with Meiji era values. So, in the Meiji period, marriage had to be almost exclusively arranged through a formal introduction called omiai, Japanese for looking at one another, where the two persons in question were allowed to see and maybe speak to each other. Some will meet for the first time at their weddings. In this period, love was thought to be inessential because not only the act of marriage was mainly for social and status purposes, but because it was deemed a sign of mental and moral weakness to fall in love. Marriage also emphasized the subordinate inferiority of women to men, learning from childhood that a daughter has to obey his father, as a wife, their husband, and as a widow, her son. One example of this will be when a single woman can work to sustain herself, but after getting married, she has to quit her job and take care of the house while her husband works. Fortunately, women gradually gain access to education and financial independence, beginning the Japanese feminist movement. During this period, these values started to shift a little bit, but not totally disappear. Now, on the post-war era from 1945 to the present, the Japan Constitution of 1947 reestablished marriage on grounds of equality and choice, based only on the mutual consent of both sexes, and it shall be maintained through mutual cooperation with the equal rights of husband and wives as a base. Omiai marriages arranged by the parents or matchmaker remained the norm immediately after the war, But unlike previous periods, now parents almost always consulted young people before arranging a marriage. And many young people asked an employer or a teacher to serve as a matchmaker for their love match. Although the decades which followed saw a steady rise in the number of love matches. And those are the topics that permeate the narrative of this movie. It can be a bit of a hard watch though, not because anything bad happens in it, but because it's slow, it's weird, and I love it. It is a glorified slice of life of normal people living their normal life. And if you're not crazy like me, it might be a bit difficult to sit through it. This movie is what I call a who movie. Because from the very start, characters just start having conversations about other characters, people, and events you have no idea about. I remember being 30 minutes into the movie and I still did not know what was going on. I first thought that this was like 12 Angry Men, except they were not angry, it's just weird. But after spending time getting to know the characters a little bit more, how they live, and listening to their conversations and motives, I started to see what this movie was trying to convey. So, with all that said, let's start from the beginning. Our protagonist is a 60-year-old widower called Shuhei Hirayama. He works as a salaryman in an office for what it appears to be a factory building. He gets a visit from what we believe is his secretary, and they have a conversation about one of the ladies that work in the building called Miss Taguchi, who has been absent lately. She tells him that it's because she's getting married. Surprised, Shuhei asks if she's going to be quitting, but the secretary is not sure. He then asks the secretary about her age and husband's occupation, to which she replies that she's 24 and doesn't have a husband yet, and that it's just her and her father. Shuhei then reassures her, saying that it'll be her turn soon. Soon after, Shuso Kawai, a friend of Shuhei from his school days, pays him a visit since he's in town for a baseball game, but that's not the only thing he's here for. They sit down and Shuso asks him how old Michiko is. Michiko is Shuhei's daughter, the second of 3 children. Shuso says his wife found a really good candidate to arrange a marriage for Michiko since she's 24 now. Shuhei tells him that she isn't ready. Shuso protests, saying that she's more than ready, but Shuhei just brushes it off and changes the topic. This first scene is very important because it lays the foundations of the driving narrative for the rest of the movie, and you will start to notice a pattern, this being the number 24, most specifically woman being 24 and not married. This is a call out to a sort of social paranoia where Japanese women must be married by the age of 24, maybe pushing it to 25 or they wither. There's actually a name for them, Christmas cakes. I think you can assume why. Later on, Shuso, Shuhei, and others, all former classmates, prepare a little reunion for one of his former teachers from Chinese classics, who goes by the name of the Gerd. They're having fun telling stories about their days in school and talking about what other teachers have been up to. Inevitably, they ask the Gerd about his daughter and how many grandchildren he has, to which he gets a little uncomfortable, almost embarrassed. We then find out that the Gerd is a lonely, drunken old man that is being taken care of by his daughter ever since his wife passed away. She never got married since she felt that it was better for her to take care of his father, and the Gerd looks visibly guilty about it. After all the drinking, Shuso and Shuhei take the Gerd back to his place, which turns out to be a noodle shop that he runs with the help of his daughter. This is very shocking for both of them since he used to be such a renowned teacher. This movie actually makes a lot of emphasis on how the war changed people's lives and how they do what they can to get by, and the girl living like this might be a result of it. We also get to meet the Gerd's daughter, who is very disappointed of what her father has become. And this scene is particularly heartbreaking because we get to see that despite her willingness to stay single to help her dad, she starts to realize that maybe she had wasted her life. The morning after, Shuso and Shuhei are having lunch together and talking about how surprising it was to see the girl in the state he's in, and gives us a scene that sets the tone for the rest of the movie.
ああ、なりたくないな。
お前だってなるぜ。
いや、俺はならんよ。
いや、なる。美智子ちゃん早く嫁にやるよ。
そうかな。
そうだよ。
いや、俺は大丈夫だよ。
Here's when the movie shows us why Shuso is so insistent on Shuhei marrying his daughter off. He sees the parallels between Shuhei and the girl and is worried that he's going to end up like him. Shuso is pretty much the best case scenario one could ideally have when getting old, at least in Japan. His wife's still alive and he has a married daughter and grandchildren. The second one will be Shuhei, whose wife has passed away and only one of his 3 children are married, but the important one is Michiko. Luckily for him, there's still an out for it. And there's a third one, which is marrying a woman way younger than him, like Horie, one of his friends. After finding out about the girl's situation, all the former students collaborate to help him financially. And in that same dinner, they decide that Shuhei should be the one to give him the money since he lives closer to him. Shuhei then goes to the girl's noodle shop and they have a little talk. The girl apologizes for the other night, but he's also very thankful since he hasn't had that kind of fun in a while. Then they get interrupted by a customer named Sakamoto that happens to know Shuhei. Here we find out that Shuhei used to be in the Navy in his youth, and this man used to be an officer in his ship. He then invites Shuhei to have a drink with him at another bar. Shuhei accepts and leaves the money for the guard on one of the tables. At the bar, Shuhei and Sakamoto eat something and have a drink while catching up, reminiscing about the past and testing the limits of my dark humor.
ねえ館長、どうして日本負けたんですかね。
ね
Here they actually have an interesting conversation about how hard things have been after the war. How Sakamoto came back to a burned down house and had to borrow money from his father-in-law to start a business. Shuhei also gets a little reminder of his situation after asking Sakamoto about his children, and he says that he has a younger one and an older one that he married off, and now he will be a grandfather. He also introduces Shuhei to the very cute lady that runs the bar, and he later remarks how much she looks like his wife. Sakamoto then asks her to play that song, which gives us the most hilarious scene in the movie.
本日天気清朗なれども波高し。
The next day, Mr. Gucci from the first sing section of the video comes into Shuhei's office to thank him for everything and say goodbye now that she's got married. Shuhei receives another reminder when he asks her how old she is and she replies that she's 24, to which he answers with,
そう、それじゃうちの娘と同じだ。まあ、幸せにね、しっかりおやんなさい。
ありがとうございます。
After that, the girl comes in. He found the money Shuhei left at the restaurant and came in to say thanks. He also wanted to thank Shuso, but he was out, so Shuhei gives him a call and they all go out for a drink. The girl obviously gets super drunk and starts talking out his thoughts. He starts telling Shuso and Shuhei how fortunate they are on the kind of lives they have. How, in the end, after you get old and everyone's gone their way, we spend our lives alone. He also regrets very deeply making her daughter take care of him and letting life pass her by. She had chances to get married, but he kept her by his side anyways. He now has become miserable and a drunk to cope with his feelings.
先生。先生。
This is pretty much the turning point for Shuhei. He still thinks that everything will be fine and there is no way he will end up like the girl. But Shuso tells him to take a good look at his future because if he doesn't hurry and marry Michiko off, he will definitely become the girl. Shuhei is visibly concerned about it. He's definitely giving it a thought now. But what does Michiko feel about this?
おかえりなさい。
あ、ただいま。
あら、またお酒臭い。
いや、今日はそう飲んどらん。
本当かな？
Just as Shuhei is the parallel to the girl, Michiko is the parallel to the girl's daughter. After her mother died, she was left to take care of Shuhei, her younger brother Kazuo, and the house. Michiko doesn't really like to take up all the work in the house, but she feels like she has to because her father and her brother don't know how to take care of themselves. She does want them to help a little bit around the house, but they just don't. Here we also start to see that post-war change from the lore section of the video, where women are starting to gain a little more autonomy, and it's shown by them refusing to be treated as servants.
姉さん、俺のズボンどこだい？ネズミの出しといてくれよ。
2階のタンスでしょ。自分で探しなさ。
She's not really opposed to the idea of marriage. She expresses it when Shuso stops her to ask if Shuhei had mentioned anything about the arrangement to her. Michiko works as a secretary for Shuso, by the way. She does want to get married someday, but the time is not right because without her, Shuhei and Kazuo will be helpless. Shuso then tells her that at this rate she will never get married and she shouldn't end up like an old maid. Later, she delivers some money to Koichi, her older brother. Koichi went to see Shuhei earlier to ask him for some money to buy a new fridge. He is also married to a woman called Akiko, and they represent that change after the war where now marriage works on grounds of equality. He's not totally the man of the house, and she's not totally a housewife. They pretty much interchange, and she also makes it very clear that she's not a maid.
ぶどう食べる？帰りに買ってきたんだけど。
明日食うよ。眠いよ。どこ引きよ。
ちょっと待ってて、私食べるんだから。自分で引いてよ。
They also have money problems. That's why he was asking for money to his dad. And they have a really cute subplot where Koichi wants to buy some used golf clubs with some of the money for the fridge. But Akiko then says no, and he pouts about it. She then agrees with the condition that she gets to buy a leather purse. In that visit, Michiko meets a guy called Miura, who is a friend of Koichi, acting as a middleman for the golf club's purchase, and Michiko starts to like him after taking the train back together.
やっぱり奥さんには優しくした方がいいのかな。
そうね。でもあんまり優しいのも嫌ね。
そうですか。難しいな。
あ、電車来た。
After having that night out with Shuso and the gird, Shuhei finally got the push that he needed and starts thinking about the future for Michiko. When he gets home that same night, he cuts to the chase and asks Michiko if she's ready to get married. Michiko is understandably weirded out by the question. She accuses him of being drunk, but he insists that he's serious. He admits that just like the girl, he has taken advantage of her willingness of staying and does not want her to let life slip her by. Despite Michiko not being opposed to the idea of marriage, she feels a strong sense of duty to stay and help her dad and her brother. She then gets upset about the whole thing and just walks out and, well...
買ってよ。
おいおい美智子
Kazuo then arrives home and also notices that Michiko is in a bad mood, yet he still asks her to make him some food. Shuhei takes this as an opportunity to prove that they can at least feed themselves and tells Kazuo to go make it himself. A few days later, Akiko comes home and tells Koichi that Michiko is getting tired of her dad bugging her about getting married to that man that Shuso is trying to arrange for her. Koichi pretty much says the same thing Michiko has been saying about how will Shuhei and Kazuo manage by themselves. Right after, Shuso pays him a visit and invites Koichi to have a drink for a little bit. There, he tells Koichi that Michiko is interested in his friend Miura, and that he should talk to him about it and see if he's also interested. Koichi says that he's a very good guy and accepts. We then move to another restaurant. Here, Koichi and Miura are having dinner and casually chatting. Koichi takes the opportunity to slide the idea of Michiko being a prospect to him. Miura is very surprised about this since some time ago he asked Koichi about her, but he said that she wasn't ready at the time. Miura then tells him that he would accept if it wasn't because he is already engaged to someone else. This comes as a shock for both Koichi and Shuhei as they discuss if they should let Michiko know about it back at home. Shuhei then builds up courage and tells Michiko to sit down for a second. He pretty much just drops it on her and tells her that he knew she was interested in Miura, but he is already engaged. Michiko takes this surprisingly well and thanks them for asking him and that she just wanted to know her options. Then Koichi asks her if she will be interested in meeting the guy that Shuso had for her. She agrees and goes to her room. Koichi and Shuhei are impressed by how shockingly well that went. That until Kazuo comes in.
どうしたんだい姉さん。
何？
泣いてたみたいだったぜ。
This scene is the one that really shows that shift from the way things used to be and the present. In previous eras to the one the characters of this movie are living in, Michiko would have had to just tough it up and pretty much had to marry someone without much saying on the matter regardless of how she feels. But here, Shuhei approaches her and tells her that she's not forced to do anything she doesn't want to and that she can just say no if she's not interested in the guy. It is totally her choice. But he wants her to at least give it a shot, meet him and see where it goes, to which she agrees. The next morning, Shuhei visits Shuso and Hori at Shuso's house to talk to him about the arrangement. They even play him a little prank about Hori already taking his spot. From here, we time skip to the day of Michiko's wedding. Koichi and Shuhei are talking about starting a family of his own and reminiscing about the past. A lady then lets them know that Michiko is ready, so they go up to see her. And as a fun fact, the wedding ceremony will be a Shinto ceremony because of the type of traditional wedding dress Michiko is wearing, as opposed to Christian ceremonies that will replace Shinto ones around the 1990s. We also get a really cute scene between Michiko and Shuhei before they set out to the ceremony.
お父さん、
ああ、分かってる分かってる。まあしっかりおやり。幸せにな。
ええ。
さあ行こう。
This movie is about many things. Coming of age, coming to terms with old age, regret, feelings of loneliness, the hardships of the common life of a post-war Japan, learning how to let go, responsibility, cultural shift, a critic to such cultural shifts, all packed in what on the surface seems to be a pretty simple premise about a dad getting her daughter married. It's about the transitional period from the old customs to the rapidly changing new ones, and how the characters deal with it. About parents that only want the best for their children above anything else, even their own ideals. And you understand those motivations because they are very human and relatable ones. At first, Shuso might seem like an old-fashioned, uptight dude that wants to follow some sort of rules, but in reality, he's just worried for the safety and future of these two, and you don't really see it until you meet the girl, and how Shuhei was walking the same path. And you also feel for Michiko, who at the beginning, all this was happening without her having much of a say in it, but ultimately ending with her making the choice for herself. After the wedding, the boys have a drink at Shuso's place. They joke around for a little bit, and then Shuso's wife asks Shuhei if Koichi and Akiko will move in, but he says him and Kazuo will be fine. They have this little insightful talk about how young couples should be left alone, how old-timers should stay out of their way. Boy or girl is all the same, they all have to go sooner or later and leave the age behind. How it is almost hard to bring them to the world knowing they leave. In the girl's own words.
結局人生は一人ぼっちですわって。お前、ひょうたんにならなくてよかったよ。
ひょうたんか。俺、死刑しよう。
Shuhei then leaves to have a drink by himself before going home. This is because, in Shuso's words,
うん。一人になりたかったんだろう。寂しいんだよ。娘が嫁に行っちゃった晩なんて嫌なもんだからな。そうだね。せっかく育てたやつをやっちゃうんだからな。うん。あっけないもんだよ。
He then comes back home very drunk. Koichi, Akiko, and Kazuo were waiting for him, and now that they know he's okay, they leave, letting Shuhei know that Akiko will come from time to time to check on him. Kazuo goes to bed, and Shuhei starts singing the march, which weirds out Kazuo.
むるもせむるも黒金のか。
おい、もういい加減に寝ろよ。
うん。
Shuhei then gets up and walks to the kitchen to get some water. We can clearly see that he feels sad and lonely like everyone said he will be after Michiku is gone. But deep down, he knows he did the right thing. He saved her. And most importantly, he didn't end up like the GERD.